And now from India, we travel to Jordan, to its capital, Amman. It is from Middle East that the coordination of Ubuntu United Nations will count on the extraordinary contribution of Princess Reem Ali. She founded the Jordan Media Institute and has had extensive experience as a journalist, notably with CNN and BBC. During the Ubuntu United Nations seminars, we will count on her presence as co-hosts together with Dr. José Ramos Horta and Professor John Volmink. Dear Princess Reem, it's a pleasure to have your presence in this Ubuntu Summit. Your example inspiring us all Ubuntu leaders. Welcome to the summit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rui Marquez, for your very kind introduction. And we're very grateful also to President Ramos Horta for his inspiring comments as always, and also for allowing us to witness what those two young participants had to share. It is such a lesson in humility. To you both, to my dear co-host, Professor John Volmink, thank you for including me in this journey. Your Excellencies, Mr. Guterres, Professor Rebelo de Souza, Mr. Habonero, and dear Mr. Danilo Turk, dear ladies and gentlemen, and all those who are supporting this initiative, and to all who have made the time to be with us today for the launch of this very important event associating the Ubuntu Academy and the United Nations. It is great to see such inspiring young leaders. When I am asked what Ubuntu means, my first instinct is usually to say, just look around and ask yourself how your street gets cleaned, how you're able to cook your meals on a gas stove when your country doesn't necessarily produce gas, and who actually picks, in the physical sense, picks the groceries you eat. And you'll find that practically anywhere in the world, the person cleaning your street was not born on your street. They may even have been born on another continent altogether. Those picking the fruits and groceries you buy at the supermarket also come from very far. And in some European countries, you'll also find you can stay warm and heat your food thanks to gas that comes from Algeria and flows under the Mediterranean Sea. I realize, of course, it can sound a little bit simplistic, but it really is, in fact, that simple. The Ubuntu principle, I am because we are, or I am because we all are, is that simple. It is a tangible reality before even being a philosophy to apply. But too often it remains a reality that is ignored, opposed, or sometimes fought. And what I'd like to insist on here is the heavy cost to not embracing the principles that underlie that philosophy. For example, the goods that I mentioned above flow freely throughout our planet, while people cannot move freely. Those fleeing persecution, poverty, and conflict find it so hard to circulate when they've even risked their lives at times to arrive at distant but safer shores. And we'll get back into that later. So what is our measure for compassion and humanity these days? Can it compare to that embodied by the great leaders, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela? There are many people who will be intervening in this forum, among which Mahmoud Yunus, Kailash Satyarthi, Leymah Gbowee, many others who are here with us today, and all the young leaders who are here through this event, who are true role models, who've carried the flames of those giants. And there are all those United Nations workers who fight for humanitarian causes at all levels, from the field missions to the Secretariat building in the city of New York. Now, I believe that among the main vectors to spread the values of Ubuntu around the world are education and the media. And in these areas, there is a lot of space for improvement in our 21st century. And that's why we need your input to reinvent ways to connect, to push for change, to bring about new perspectives that can allow our humanity to thrive. The education expert John Dewey saw this link between education and democracy as building citizenship through engaging with communities, embracing indigenous knowledge systems that favored inclusivity. Now that is first and foremost what our world needs to see a most urgent reform. And no one knows this better, by the way, than the president of the Ubuntu Global Network, Professor John Volmink, who played a major role in leading post-apartheid education reform in South Africa. Promoting a culture that fosters inclusivity is not a new concept. Maybe it's just something we've forgotten along the way. If you look at the Abbasid Baghdad in the 8th century, the translation movement drew scholars and works from Greece, Persia, Rome, India, and China, and gave birth to the House of Wisdom. And in the 9th century, the University of Qarawin in Fez, considered by UNESCO to be the oldest operational educational institution in the world, attracted great Muslim, Jewish, and Christian scholars from everywhere. And in an echo of what such places of enlightenment can achieve, Roy Jenkins, a former British Labour Secretary, asked in 1966, where in the world is there a university which could preserve its fame, or a cultural centre which would keep its eminence, or a metropolis which could hold its drawing power if it were to turn inwards and so serve only its own hinterland and its own racial group? To live apart for a person, a city, a country, is to lead a life of declining intellectual stimulation. Today, of course, the media can also play a significant role in building bridges, but we've also seen how dangerous it can be if that space is occupied by nihilism and hate speech. So it's very important to harness what the technologies of today can offer for good and use them to reach out. It also allows for mobilization and support for causes that highlight our common humanity, as we've seen with the Black Lives Matter movement. Professor Anita Varma, who teaches media at UC Berkeley, recently talked about solidarity reporting. And she said, instead of emphasizing individualism, solidarity stories emphasize community cohesion. This kind of reporting is intimately linked to the notions we defend. And it reminds the public, as she says, that a threat to our neighbors is a threat to all of us. And that is even more true in a pandemic. In concrete terms, my freedom from COVID means nothing until you are free from it as well. If you needed more proof that everything and everyone is connected, look at how the health of a population is also linked to how it treats its immigrants and refugees. Early on in the pandemic, for example, in the United States, it was possible to move ventilators and equipment between the various states. We go back to movement of things, but many of the doctors and nurses could not circulate, reducing the number of people that were able to receive treatment. And why? Because they were foreign workers whose work visas allowed them to work only in specific states. Now, how ironic when you realize that the man who invented the Pfizer vaccine was a Turkish immigrant in Germany. And the COVID vaccine, it's supposed to be accessible to all, but as of a month ago, the richest countries still had more than 80% of the vaccine doses, as compared with low-income countries who only had 0.01% of them. Surely we can do better than this. On the other hand, of all the countries in the world, Jordan and Nepal, by far not the richest, were the first to vaccinate their refugee populations. And there's a matter of principle, and that is why I firmly believe that it is the prevailing mindset behind the philosophy of Ubuntu that can unite us all. And make no mistake, it's a mindset that has already proven its worth in actions. The kind of action that actually led to the end of colonial rule in India, to the end of segregation in the US, and to the end of apartheid in South Africa. It's also the kind of action that brought forth the birth of the United Nations itself, as well as the European Union after World War II, though somehow it seems to have fallen on deaf ears when it comes to the rights of Palestinians and when it comes to the rights of refugees, for example. And many today are asking why there are such double standards when it comes to justice and human rights. So maybe today we need to remember how that worked for our forefathers and apply these concepts to the various challenges we face, especially in regions like mine. We in Jordan host millions of refugees, many of whom see the double standards of an international community that talks about human rights but refuses to let people in, not recognizing that our futures are intertwined and that the lack of justice anywhere is a lack of justice everywhere. Nelson Mandela said, "Your freedom and mine cannot be separated." With that in mind, let's associate the principles of Ubuntu, for instance, with the 4 freedoms identified by Franklin Roosevelt. You will find that my freedom from want, my freedom from fear, my freedom of expression, and my freedom to worship mean nothing without your freedom. Because my freedom to not be hungry should not mean that you go hungry because I've taken your land. My freedom to worship should not mean that soldiers storm your mosque at the eve of a religious holiday and prevent you to worship there. My freedom of expression should not mean that your voice will be silenced when you express yourself and denounce these facts. And my right to feel safe in my country should not mean that the children of the others continue to live in fear from illegal use of force, bombings, rockets, or killings. So I'd like to call on students, young people, and civil society groups to join this program and join us in reaching out and reminding those who need reminding of our shared humanity. Between now and December, those of you who join us shall be exposed to thought-provoking and diverse concepts. You will formulate a great many ideas of your own. And what you achieve here together, though, will have weight only if each one of these ideas is followed by concrete positive actions that benefit communities around you based on our social contract of mutual respect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Princess Reem, for your highly inspirational speech. Thank you to be with us